uploads the same for sharing either to his Facebook account or possibly to his Gmail account or some other SNS for sharing. And the next day the same secretary gets that USB back to the office. Now this is a very typical scenario. It's not something discovered, it's not something out of the world. You see this happen very often. I have seen this happening in our own office. The simplest question that I have in this kind of a scenario is this simple USB device, which probably has some kind of an important presentation and some kind of an important data, has traveled from an office premises, which is supposedly a secure premises, to the house, which is not a secure network or which is not a secure endpoint, and from the house it has traveled to a cyber cafe, which you know again is an unsecured endpoint, and it has traveled back. And when it travels back, what this USB carries is something nobody knows. And this is how you have something called as an information leakage over through endpoints or information sharing via endpoints. And most of the threats that happen or that's real time in today's world that we normally see happening with our own customers is because of this small innocuous device. Let's look at the typical computational and communicational endpoints. Now, all these things, what I'm showing out here, all of your companies has it, but you may not realize it. You have the desktops, you have the email servers, you have the application servers or web servers, you have the file servers. People carry mobile laptops all across the world. I do that. People carry PDAs and smartphones. I do that. Then you have the home computer and n number of users who are accessing all these endpoints. Let's look at some of the mobile or the hardware endpoints. It could be a USB drive, as I told you 5 minutes back. It could be a CD-ROM. CD-ROM has been there for long, but it's not considered to be a risky endpoint. Let me put it that way. You have Wi-Fi devices. Wi-Fi devices again is basically an extremely unsecure endpoint, depending upon the kind of protocols that it uses. It could be a web-driven or it could be WPA-driven security which is implemented on the Wi-Fi. I won't get deeper into it, but Wi-Fi is one of the biggest security threats I've ever seen. Bluetooth devices, mobile devices which need not have basically any kind of wires to connect to a device, then a portable storage device, and handheld devices like iPods and smartphones. Today iPods, for example, I have seen iPods being misused by people in many organizations. I don't know how many of you have any kind of policies inside your organization that basically restricts the usage of a simple device like iPod or connecting the iPod to your local networks or secure networks within your company. And then comes the software endpoints. Software endpoints is again an extremely different threat landscape that we can look at. It could be operating systems. I don't know how many of you actually have seen whether your operating systems are patched or unpatched. 3 months back when we had the configure attack, not 3 months back, in the month of October last year when we had the configure attack, then we had the same in Feb and then in March. 90% of the systems which got attacked was primarily because of unpatched systems. Then we have office automation software, web browsers. Web browsers again have a huge problem on its own, whether it's Firefox, whether it is Internet Explorer, or even if it is Safari on a Mac OS X or Safari on basically an iMac. You have Web 2.0 applications. When I say Web 2.0 applications, I'm talking about SNS, I'm talking about Twitter-like community, I'm talking about a Facebook-like community. You have n number of threats coming out there and you read it day in and day out. You have email clients, you all know about it, it's a long story. You have the chat IRC systems, instant messaging software and FTP clients. And these are some of the software endpoints. What are the threat scenarios of the past and the present? In the past, threats were noisy and visible to everyone. Today threats are silent. You don't see it. You don't see things happening within your network. You don't see things happening on your PDS. You don't see things happening on your USB. There are threats out there which continuously keep resurfacing, you keep getting continuously attacked, but you don't get to know about it. And that's the biggest problem today. Then you have threats. Earlier threats were indiscriminate and hit everyone. Today, they're highly targeted. You either have a Facebook or you either have some kind of a SNS. I will just go through the other points now. And what do enterprises lose? You all know about the kind of problems. You have a loss in the leak of information. You have loss of reputation. You have tons of other problems due to loss of productivity and stuff like that. And what are the damage routes? I have just given here some of the damage routes that happen that happen from the various endpoints. It could be software, it could be browsers, it could be instant messaging software, or it could be hardware. Now, getting into each of these points it's like it's going to take ages for me. But then this slide actually gives you an idea about what are the kind of different problems that you might end up having when you have unsecure endpoints. Let's look at some of the attack instances as I have put here. You have employees copying data into iPods. I have seen this n number of times happening in enterprises where they have very weak policies within the corporate networks. You have people getting people getting attacked because of phishing traps or Nigerian scams. I believe many of you would have heard about it in one of the Mumbai Times recently, where one of the senior executives got ripped off for a few crores of rupees in a Nigerian scam. And it can happen to anyone, trust me. This is one of the cases which has come up, but then any of you could be targets. And there are other problems here as I've mentioned, and one of the biggest problems is going to the cloud vulnerability. When I say cloud vulnerability, today you are keeping data on the cloud. Cloud is being touted as one of the biggest boons or the biggest blessings for computing users. But then it's also one of the biggest threats because you don't know what's happening on the cloud behind your back. So what's the solution? Now this is a 5-point security ring that I have put here, which basically looks at the various parameters within your network which needs to be secured. Again, it talks about internal networks, internal gateways, the perimeter security, the extended perimeter and the outside perimeter, where you need to have in each of these circles. One of the most important things that you need to have are policies that mandate and that basically control the usage of each of these systems. How reducing the threat exposure? What kind of threats that you have and how do you reduce it? Basically, there are two kinds of data, as I have put here: data in motion, which gets carried from place to place, either on endpoint devices like this mobile device, like this USB, or it could be a data at rest, maybe your database, or a 10 GB or a 20 gig database which basically maintains your employees' information and stuff like that. And then you have the asset protection and control. And what are the different layers of endpoint security? I have put here. Obviously, an AV and an anti-spyware is something which is extremely important on each of the machines and what its capabilities should be. Then we have the web protection, which basically ensures that you are protected against attacks from the internet or basically from social networking sites. For example, you have the anti-spam and anti-phishing. Then you have the firewall on the server, firewall on the workstations, again, on both the sides. Then you have the intrusion prevention, which basically looks at any kind of targeted attacks. It could be a bot attack, it could be a DDoS attack. And finally the device, and also the device control, what I am talking about. How do you ensure